Hello everyone, Dr. Sleep. Have you seen it yet? If you haven't, I'm gonna give you some reasons why I really think you should. Whether you're a Stephen King fan, a Kubrick fan, or somewhere in between, or maybe not even on that realm. I think this film is just worth a watch. In general, I'm gonna start by not really getting into any spoiler territory, and I will give you a warning before I start talking about spoilers. We're gonna do a simple, I'm not gonna do a plot breakdown, I'm not gonna do a synopsis, I'm going to talk about what I enjoyed about the film, what stood out to me in terms of the technical, production, creative realm, and then I'll go for more detail from there. So, just to start, we're gonna be safe. We're gonna talk about direction, we're gonna talk about cinematography, we're gonna talk about set design, acting, music, all of that great stuff. So, all right, here we go. I wanna start by saying that I am a huge Stanley Kubrick fan. He is one of my favorite directors of all time, and The Shining was the first film I've seen by Stanley Kubrick himself. The myth, the man, the legend. I saw The Shining for the first time in middle school. I was very impressionable, and I was very much into the darker side of human nature, which of course, if you're familiar with either Stephen King's work or Kubrick's work, those worlds combine. Something that didn't combine too well though, as a lot of us are familiar with, is that Stephen King was actually not a fan of Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of his novel, The Shining. Dr. Sleep does something very special, or should I say Mike Flanagan, the director and editor of this film, does something very, very special, where he brings together two worlds. He brings together the world of Stanley Kubrick's visual and cinematic masterpiece, The Shining, and Stephen King's novel, The Shining, which are two very different, although grounded in very familiar territory, subtext-wise, very similar stories, but very different interpretations of them. And I think Mike Flanagan does a superb job of bringing these two worlds together and really reconciling a lot of the rift that came from from Kubrick's interpretation. I personally, as a film nerd, love Stanley Kubrick's version, but also as a Stephen King fan myself, from a very young age, I also love his book. I do believe that Kubrick added a lot of art and depth and subtext that Stephen King didn't necessarily have apparent in his novel, which I really respect and enjoy. And I'm sure a lot of you guys out there can agree with me on that. So I have a piece of paper that I might reference from time to time because I am still, as much as I love talking about film, and I'm pretty well versed in understanding what constitutes a good film and so on. Technically, I am a novice YouTuber. I still have my training wheels on. I'm still getting used to this. So if I don't have the most professional manner, and if I tend to slip up on words once in a while, please give me a little leeway. I'm still new to this, but I really wanted to review this movie and give a little more insight into what I perceive to be its highest qualities and what it has to offer as a film in general. Back to Mike Flanagan. I have to say how incredibly impressed I've been with his work up to this point. And now, having seen Dr. Sleep, I really do believe that there's nothing that Mike Flanagan can't do within the realm of horror. That being said, Mike Flanagan brings something entirely new to the genre of horror. He brings a human element, and this is seen in any of the works that I've seen from him so far. He brings a heart and a depth and a subtext about the human psychology, developmental stages of human psychology, how we grow up in our home and how that affects us, family dynamics, sibling dynamics, and also he deals very well with showing the repercussions and the havoc wreaked by drug use, addiction, and drug abuse, and how not only does that affect the person that is indulging or becoming almost a victim of this cycle, but how it also affects those connected to that person. He delves so deeply into these things in such a way that I have not really seen by other directors up until this point. If any of you are familiar with Stephen King's work, you also know that Stephen King, this is very familiar territory for him as well. He himself has struggled with a lot of these personal hurdles in his life, such as alcoholism. And we see that very prominent in many of his protagonists in his stories, because I do believe that this, I believe it, I'm sure most Stephen King fans are well aware that this is a reflection of his own fears, doubts, and he sees this struggle as a really pertinent one in being human in general. It doesn't have to be addiction, it doesn't have to be alcoholism, it could be any variety of personality traits that can maybe not be for the best in the human spectrum. So, that being said, Flanagan does a phenomenal job at this, whether you're watching Dr. Sleep, Haunting of Hill House. I just watched a film the other night that was one of his earliest films, entirely tiny budget, that he filmed called Absentia, and I highly recommend it if you're into Mike Flanagan's work. It's very low budget, it's not a spectacle, it's of any sort, but it really, it exemplifies how good he is at following character, stories, and just the little conversations that we have as people, which is another thing that I want to bring up about Dr. Sleep. The first half hour or so is a slow burn. I personally was enthralled because it felt very human. It felt very real. It got really deeply into how we as people express ourselves, or maybe choose not to express ourselves in this world, depending on what's going on internally within our own minds, within the confines of our own minds, and especially how trauma shapes us, shapes our personalities, shapes how we interact with others, etc. It's fascinating to me, but I can see where some people might have a complaint in that realm, especially being used to horror films specifically being so filled with constant action, build up tension, then the release of the jump scare. One thing that Mike Flanagan does that I am in such admiration of is that he earns any scares that happen. He's not using cheap jump scares and quick cuts and spikes of music to keep you on the edge of your seat as an audience. He doesn't talk down to you as an audience member. He assumes that you have the intellect and the patience to wait for the real thrill to pay off because of the investment you've made in the characters and the story up until that point. So that's not a spoiler, that's just how Flanagan works as far as I've perceived so far as a viewer. I really respect him. If you can't tell, I think there are some, Stephen King, there's no doubt that he is one of the most prolific writers of our time, especially within the genre of horror. But it is difficult, in my opinion, to adapt his work really well cinematically. Some examples are Shawshank Redemption, Stand By Me. The Mist, I think, is an excellent film. It reminds me of that almost B monster movie horror style, but it has a real depth to it. And in my opinion, the best films that adapt Stephen King's works are the ones with heart and soul, because a lot of people write off Stephen King as just being a horror writer, but if you really look into his work and you look into his subtext, so much of it is about the human condition, human relationships, human struggles and trauma. And that is why I think that Mike Flanagan is one of the best people out there today at adapting Stephen King's work. So, all right, let me reference my page again. Score. Beautiful, beautifully done score. Absolutely love it. Another thing I also want to mention is that Mike Flanagan at no point tries to be Kubrick. I think he's smart enough to realize that no one can ever be Kubrick. Kubrick is in a world of his own when it comes to filmmaking. However, what Mike Flanagan does beautifully is he pays homage, both visually and in terms of his camera work. He pays beautiful homage, and even editing with some beautiful crossfades we have in there, to Kubrick's vision of The Shining. it evokes a lot of feelings to me that felt very similar visually and even in terms of sound design and of course score. It harkens back to the original score that we have from The Shining, which was actually adapted. I'm not completely familiar with the name of the song. I'm sure someone out there is. You can write in the comments if you want, but it was adapted from another song, and they added some Native American chanting and sounds into it, which in the original score, which I thought was so phenomenal, especially because if you read the novel, Stephen King's novel, and I think they even mention it in the film, that originally the Overlook Hotel was supposed to have been built upon an ancient Indian burial ground, which is of course a no-no in the horror universe because that just opens up all kind of realms for negative things to get in there and haunt us and possess us. And yeah, so that's a recurring theme in that world. So all right, so here we go. What else? Sets, set design, locations. Gorgeous. One thing I have to give Mike Flanagan and his entire creative team so many props for is the exquisite set design. It's seamless, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, especially, I don't want to do spoilers yet. We're not going to do that yet, but just rest assured that the set design, the locations, where everything is filmed, it's beautiful, it's so well constructed, and of course, Mike Flanagan, taking another page out of Kubrick's book, knows how to take a nice wide shot and just let the actors do their job, which is a pet peeve of mine, is constant close-ups, constant snap zooms, constant things that make you feel as an audience member that you're never really watching a person be a person. I love wide shots. I love long takes for that reason. Another thing that we all know, if you've seen Haunting of Hill House, Mike Flanagan is a true artist at the long single take. One of the best long takes I've ever seen was actually in one episode of Haunting of Hill House. I highly recommend that show from multiple angles, but especially from a technical angle. If you have any interest in camera work or editing or just shooting in general, I highly recommend watching that show. And of course, also watching Dr. Sleep, if you can't tell. I'm all for this movie. All right, what else? Acting is phenomenal. The acting is great. I love it. I should also mention that I, as a huge Kubrick and Shining fan, I was very nervous about this film coming out. And I don't see films in theaters very often, especially because it's so expensive now. I can't believe how expensive. The tickets are $17 each to go see, I don't know where you guys live, but it was $17 a piece. So if I'm gonna see a film in the theaters, I want it to be well worth the time. And let me tell you, this film is long, but I wanted it to be longer. And then it's rare that I feel that way about films. I was completely enthralled in both the characters and the story and just the setting in general. I really loved watching things unfold and being in that world. So anyway, I'm picky with movies, but I had to see this in theaters, being the fan that I am, despite the nervousness. And if it's something that I do want to see, I at all costs avoid reviews that give spoilers, which is part of the reason why I'm not doing any spoilers up front for you guys. I want to make sure that if you haven't seen it, you can listen to what I'm talking about now. But once I get into spoiler territory, I really recommend you see it, unless what I'm saying doesn't resonate with you on a personal level, in which case you can watch the spoilers if you want to. But I really suggest as soon as I get to the spoiler part, you just turn off this video, go see the movie, and then you can come back and watch the spoilers with me, and we can dig more into the details of everything. All right, what else do we have here on my little list? Oh yes, back to acting. Rebecca Ferguson as a character called Rose the Hat. Absolutely phenomenal, beautiful, seductive performance. Just loved her performance, was riveted in every scene she was in. She completely pulled me in, both emotionally and just gave me this, just evoked this tense feeling in every scene she was in. I wanted to love her, but of course, without giving too many spoilers, there are many reasons why you don't want to get pulled into this this character, but I think that's so brilliant how she made decisions as an actress, how Flanagan made decisions as a director in directing her. I think there was a marriage between the two where her choices and his vision really came together in a way where it was very reflective of who she was as a character, and that as an audience member I felt so pulled in and almost seduced by her aura and her as a person, her performance in general, but knowing, you know, in the back of my mind that that was not the best decision to fully give in to this character. Ewan McGregor, I love Ewan McGregor. I've loved him since I was a little kid, seeing him in movies growing up. I loved him as Obi-Wan Kenobi, of course. I loved him in Moulin Rouge. I've loved him in everything I've seen him in. I just think he's phenomenal. He seems like a really good person in general, which is always nice to know when an actor is actually, seems like a good, down-to-earth person. So I thought he was great. I think he did a great job displaying the trauma that we of course realized that someone like Danny Torrance growing up in the scenario, in the lifestyle, in the home that he did with an abusive and alcoholic father like Jack Torrance, we really see that displayed internally and externally to an extent within Ewan McGregor's performance. And I was very impressed, but I wasn't expecting anything less from him. But you know, if anything, he elevated my expectations even more with his performance. It was very, very good. It was sombering. It was just excellent. We, of course, have to talk about Kylie Curran. Kylie Curran was the girl that within the film, and if you've seen any previews, spoilers, not spoilers, but previews or trailers or teasers, she's in this. And she is the young girl that possesses The Shining. And this actress is phenomenal. She's a scene stealer. She is great. She's confident within her role, within her character, and she just exudes this beautiful charisma, but also this vulnerability. And I think she really had fun with this role. She's a joy to watch. You're really rooting for her the whole time, and she's just awesome. I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot more of Kaylee in Hollywood, in films, as she gets older. I hope she continues to make amazing choices like this, and Flanagan is one that tends to use actors in his work over time and give them repeat roles in his films. So I'm hoping we'll see her again in another Flanagan production because she's great. She's so fun to watch. Zahn McClarnon plays Crow Daddy, who is a member of the True Knot, and he's working alongside Rose the Hat's character. He's another one. I mean, there's a great cast in this overall, but those are the ones in particular I wanted to give little shout outs to because their performances are really impressive, and I really, really enjoyed each of their performances, their on-screen energy, and yeah, they're great. So I highly recommend that. All right, let's see. I think we're close to getting into spoiler territory. So I'm gonna move a little cautiously through the next things that I say. Let's see. I mentioned how Flanagan did some great crossfades, paying homage to Kubrick's style, because of course in The Shining, Kubrick's version, we see some beautiful crossfades. Overall tone is very different than The Shining. This film is not The Shining. This film, I wouldn't even necessarily consider a direct sequel to The Shining. I think this film stands on its own in an entirely new way. It is an excellent extension of The Shining story, and we see how one specific character works through many of the experiences that he had at the Overlook Hotel in the original Shining. But yes, it is within its own world, within its own tone, but you can certainly feel when watching that it does take place within the world that the Overlook happened in, which I really was nervous about. I was nervous to see how that was executed, and I was extremely impressed. And it's such a great feeling. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with this, but it's such a great feeling to me when I am nervous about seeing a film and I go to watch it. And then at some point in the film, I relax and I'm like, it's good. It's okay. This is well done. Even if it doesn't wrap up perfectly, I can relax enough to know that it's well done. So all things being said, I think if you have complaints about this film, if you see flaws in any of its work, I do think overall it is well done, especially compared to most films coming out these days, which just seem to be utter cash grabs and made for an audience that isn't too intelligent and doesn't have enough patience, especially when it comes to horror. I don't know about you guys, but I am so sick of jump scares in horror, and I think we're starting to get more material that is harkening back to the more psychological, internal terror that we feel. And of course, one of the things I love about the original Shining is the Lovecraftian element of it, where there's something deeper, there's something underneath that we aren't seeing directly, we aren't being told directly. There's something uncanny happening and everything just feels a little off. Now that's something where I feel Flanagan does a good job, but he doesn't do a Kubrick job at. So if there's a complaint there, I wouldn't call it a complaint. I think it's just a difference of approach, and he hasn't quite tapped into that element yet. Where Kubrick tends to hold back very much and really give a sense of bleakness, I think Mike Flanagan differs where he really fills in many of those spaces. But I venture to guess that that's because Mike Flanagan has a lot of heart. He's very sensitive. You can tell through his work that he's a very sensitive person. He cares about people. If I had to guess, I would say he's probably a very empathetic person. He probably cares about people a lot. Not saying that Kubrick didn't, but we do know through his directing style that he wasn't the nicest or easiest director to work with actors. We all know how Shelley Duvall feels about that. Look at any of the behind the scenes footage and you'll see he was not warm. He did not really give much empathy or care to the people that he was working with. I think he enjoyed directing, but he was a true perfectionist, and he had a very linear vision of what he wanted when he was working. I think he was constantly reconstructing scenes and plot elements and stories and the script, which we all know from Jack Nicholson saying that he just ended up throwing out his script in The Shining because he was constantly doing rewrites. I think Mike Flanagan is probably a much smoother, maybe even more organized director to work with, and I think he truly cares about not only the actors he's working with, but the characters that they're portraying. He wants to portray a human story. He wants to portray human relationships, and he wants to dig into not only the warmth that he sees people as having inevitably, he wants to dig into trauma that people have had, which I think he does an excellent job with. Okay, what else? All right, I think we're ready for spoilers, guys. Are you guys ready for spoilers? Again, if you haven't seen Dr. Sleep and anything I said or anyone else has said has resonated with you, I really recommend that you turn this off before I say any spoilers and go see it. And then come back to this video and let me know what you thought, but please go see it. It's worth the money. If it's $20 for a ticket and you have $20 to spare, I really recommend going seeing it. I think it's worth seeing in the theaters. It is an extremely beautiful theatrical experience. And I'm gonna give a little spoiler here, but just to see the Overlook Hotel again is worth seeing it in theaters, okay? So please go for it. I mean, it's your choice. I'm not gonna tell you what to do. You don't have to listen to me. I'm just a weirdo on the internet, but I recommend it. All right, anyway, we're gonna get into spoilers now. You guys ready? Okay, I'm gonna give you some time to click off the video. All right? Okay, bye people that are going to see it. Bye, have fun at the theaters. Okay, those of you who have seen it, hey guys, I mean Dr. Sleep, come on, right? It's pretty good, right? Unless you hated it. In which I'm interested to know why people hated it too. I haven't really heard anybody talking about it that negatively, although obviously upon checking IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic scores, it's not 100%. So clearly there are some dislikes for this film, and I'm interested to know why. I'm sure that I would be able to see from that angle, but obviously you guys can tell that I personally really enjoy this film. So let's talk about all the stuff that I would really like to dig into a little more. Okay, let's see. I'm referencing my list again. Okay, set designs, locations. I feel like the middle school version of myself that first saw The Shining was just so happy and so excited to go back to the Overlook Hotel. It was gorgeous. It was seamlessly done. I do believe the shots, the aerial shots going on the drive up to the Overlook Hotel, where originally Jack and Wendy Torrance and little Danny were driving in their Volkswagen Beetle. I believe that those shots were not recreated, but they were enhanced using nighttime visuals. I think they darkened those shots up, which is really, really cool, and it looked gorgeous. It looked awesome. It was so cool and haunting, really, to see that at night. If I do have one complaint about this movie, and I haven't heard anyone complain about it yet, this was my personal complaint, and I think it might just be from how many times I've seen the original Shining and how invested I am in each of the characters. But I did find that a lot of the actors that Flanagan or his casting department did choose to play the original characters, it kind of took me out of the experience just a little bit, because a lot of them, it didn't have to do visually as much. A lot of them didn't sound and have the same beats and tempo to their words and to their actions as the original actors did. And I'm very, very familiar with the original actors, and that kind of, it just felt a little bit off to me. I did feel as though Flanagan might have shown the lady from the bathtub almost a little too much. What I loved about the lady in the bathtub in room 237 was how much of a mystery she was. She's basically the shark in Jaws for the Overlook Hotel. You see little glimpses, you see one big glimpse, which is really uncomfortable, and that's it. You don't see her constantly throughout the movie, and that is a choice that Flanagan did, which I can understand and I can respect it, although I did feel like she was overused a little bit. But I don't know. I'm sure some people absolutely love that, because a lot of people really love that scene from the original. I love the scene from the original. I just felt as though she might have been relied on a little too heavily. Just an opinion though. Don't at me. All right, what else? Yes, so that's another thing. Even the twins, the twin little girls from the Overlook Hotel, from the original innkeeper or keeper of the hotel who killed his family, Delbert Grady, I believe his name is, the Grady twins, they didn't look at all to me like the original twins. They didn't move like them, and their voice didn't really sound like them. So that pulled me out of it just a little bit. But listen, this is not about me complaining. I don't want to complain, I don't want to be negative, but if I did have to say one thing kind of took me out of it a little bit, it would be those elements. And even the guy that said, "Great party, isn't it?" with the blood on his head, even that voice and his body movements felt just a little bit too different for me to completely fall into it. That being said, I really enjoyed the actor they chose to play Dick Hallorann, who is one of my favorite characters from The Shining. I absolutely love him, and I love Scatman Crothers' performance in that. I find it both haunting and comforting at the same time. He was just a really, really cool actor who portrayed a really, really cool role in a really, really cool way. And this actor that they got did a really good job. He didn't feel quite like Mr. Hallorann, but you can't get someone to play it perfectly. And same kind of feelings for the woman they cast to play Shelley Duvall as Danny's mother. Similar feelings. She just didn't look the role so much, but she did a pretty good job, I think, at vocally sounding more like Shelley Duvall, so that was pretty good. But some lines that she said were pretty much line for line, which I found kind of funny. as though she hadn't really evolved her speech patterns after a horrific event, which I think, I don't know, maybe I feel like I would change a little bit in the years following, but I don't know, maybe not. Who else? Oh, and then of course, the actor's name escapes me. I didn't write it down, but the actor who played Elliot in E.T., who was of course in Haunting of Hill House and also in Gerald's Game, which are both Mike Flanagan films and shows, he played Jack Torrance, and that one was really, really iffy for me. I both enjoyed it and also felt a little bit distracted by it. It's Jack Nicholson, guys, it's Jack Nicholson, and he did fine, but it didn't evoke those feelings from me the way that Jack Nicholson's performance did, of the completely unhinged, just crazy person in the Overlook Hotel. It didn't evoke those same feelings. I knew what they were doing. I knew what they were going for. It was cool. The dialogue in that scene was really good. And that's actually gonna be a good lead into my next topic, which is subtext, dialogue, the actual story, what's actually going on, what evokes Stephen King's language, and what also Mike Flanagan is portraying, which is the subtext of trauma, human relationships, abuse. And I think this scene was a pivotal moment in that. We see Ewan McGregor's character, Dan, struggling with not only alcoholism, but of course the reason he turned to a substance to escape what he was feeling, because of course he possesses the shining, so he's constantly tapped into this world of death and being haunted by, of course, the spirits of the Overlook, and of course being haunted by his father's actions, choices, and behavior throughout his childhood, which I do believe Kubrick and Stephen King also hinted at with Danny's character in the original Shining, even as a 5-year-old child. I forget how old he's supposed to be. I believe the actor was 5 when he played Danny, so I'm just gonna say 5. But he already had elements of trauma exhibited within his character and personality at 5 years old, which of course, I think if any of us are growing up in households that have abuse or alcoholism or substance abuse or any type of rift in the familial relationship, we are going to exhibit signs in one way or another, even at a very young age. And of course, those signs evolve and change as we get older, as we develop, as we mature. And I think Ewan McGregor did a seamless job at portraying those changes and portraying how that would affect an adult man. Affect an adult man, not effect an adult man. But yes, so I think he did a really good job of that. And of course, the scene where it harkened back to the scene in the Overlook with Jack Nicholson when he went to the bar and was faced with his own choices and his own alcohol abuse. He had quit prior, according to the story, about 5 or 6 months prior to taking on the job of caretaker of the Overlook. At this point, he was unraveling. The story was unraveling. He was unraveling as a person. He was already unhinged, especially in Kubrick's interpretation of the story. And he was faced with Lloyd the bartender, who poured him a drink of his favorite, Jack Daniels. And of course, Jack Nicholson's character, Jack Torrance, took the alcohol, and so ensued the... Oh, my cat woke up. Welcome, Nova. Welcome to the story. So that, of course, that led to the accumulation of further events of the complete unraveling of his persona, his psyche, his character, and violence and craziness ensued. What we see with Flanagan's version in Dr. Sleep is a mirrored scene in which Danny is facing his own father. In fact, he is facing his own trauma. He's facing his own demons, his own personal internalized experience that he, up until this point, has been either suppressing or acting out in negative ways in his life. I mean, it's a very deep scene in many ways. I think Flanagan did a really good job. And again, the only thing that really kind of pulled me out of it a little bit was the fact that it's not Jack Nicholson. But I don't think I'd want a deep fake. I don't think I'd want digital de-aging. I don't think I'd want Jack Nicholson. I don't think Jack Nicholson would want to do it. He just wants to sit in his backyard and read, like, and eat, you know, chili out of Tupperware containers at the LA Lakers games. He doesn't want to be bothered with playing Jack Torrance again, as much as I would love him to come back to the role. But anyway, I digress. I could go on about this forever if you can't tell. But I'm continually impressed with Flanagan's work with trauma and with people facing their trauma. I think he did a very similar exercise in Gerald's Game. At the end of Gerald's Game. Spoiler, it's been out several years. I highly recommend it, but we have the protagonist facing their own trauma and realizing that that trauma was not a figment of their imagination. It didn't have to be separate entanglements with other people. It was their trauma and they needed to face it before they could let it go. Very similar actually to The Haunting of Hill House as well. So we see these echoes of subtext and these echoes of human trauma that Flanagan loves to use in his work. And of course, I think that's probably the biggest reason he loves Stephen King's source material so much, is that Stephen King, many, I don't know, thousands of books as he's written, I think I haven't read all of them, trust me, but most of them harken back to the human element, the human trauma, the human experience, and what happens because of those things, what choices we make, etc. So, what else? I mean, also props to Mike Flanagan. He didn't just direct this film, he edited it as well, and the editing is really, really good. He did a really good job. I have to give him props. He's still young too, guys. He's only, I want to say he's in his early to mid 40s maybe, and this guy's making these really good, solid films. And I love the horror genre, but I do find it really difficult and challenging to find horror that's done with this amount of heart and soul, and I find it really refreshing. It does have scary elements, it does have terrorizing elements, it has some really dark themes that really creeped me out and made me feel extremely uncomfortable. One scene in particular that really bothered me, of course, was the scene with the little baseball player, number 19, who was a prodigy, who of course possessed the shine, which the True Knot was going after because they need steam to continue to live long and eat well. And they found this little awesome champion who hit every ball probably because he was tuned into other people's mindsets and internal dialogue, and he could see and feel when people were going to hit the ball, where they were going to hit it, which is a really cool exercise in terms of if you're going to evolve and adapt The Shining, to see how else it plays out in our real universe. Another thing that I'd like to say on that note is that this felt very grounded in reality. It didn't feel like a fantasy. I mean, of course there were fantastical elements, but it felt grounded in reality. Even the little bit of when Danny Torrance and Abra are driving to the Overlook Hotel, her father has been killed, and someone, her mother phones her, and you see a shot back to her mother at the home crying, and there are police everywhere, of course investigating because this man was found dead. That is what would really happen. I'm glad we didn't gloss over that and act as though with no holds barred, you know, Ewan McGregor and Danny Torrance and Abra just drive up to the Overlook, no Amber Alert, no police involvement. So that was really cool how it did feel grounded in reality for the most part. Another thing that really freaked me out, but I thought was really cool and really well done, was the cycling that would happen when members of the True Knot were lethally injured. And what cycling was, in my perception, now I haven't read the book, I should have said that earlier, I have not read Dr. Sleep. I've read The Shining many times since middle school, and I've watched The Shining many times since middle school. But I have never read Dr. Sleep, so I'm not familiar with the source material. But from what I saw in the film, cycling appeared to be the most horrific and painful way to die. And I do believe that that probably has something to do with the fact that these are people that have chosen to live unnaturally long lives, to look healthy, to be healthy, because they are stealing the life essence and the steam from people who possess the shining, and they are killing these people in extraordinarily painful and torturous ways. And I believe maybe in some way they are dying these excruciating deaths in the same way that they killed all of their victims. It might be a cumulative effect. All that steam they took in, that was all that pain and suffering, I believe they are also experiencing themselves as they die. And it is creepy to watch. I found it very creepy. The visuals, the effects, I thought were beautifully done, very well done, very creepy. It just really makes you think, wow, what a trade-off. There's another element of subtext that I really enjoy is if you are kind of like the karmic debt that seems to happen in life. If you are a negative person, if you treat people, others negatively, if you hurt other people, typically it's because you're hurt yourself and you've experienced something that causes you to take that out on others. But in this version, it's because of that pain that you inflict on others, you will get that pain back yourself. And I thought that was really well done and a really cool nod to karmic debt, and of course, I'm sure Stephen King's source material. What else? I could talk about my interpretations and theories for this for a while. I just really enjoy it overall, but I don't want this video to be too long. I'm looking at it now, it's 41 minutes already, so we're gonna try to cut it short. I hope that this gave a nice broad look into how I view Dr. Sleep, and then went a little bit more into the details of why I really enjoyed it and some things I didn't love so much. But I also kind of want to know, where I stand, where you guys stand in comparison. If that didn't bother you, or if some things bothered you that I didn't even notice. So it's interesting. Sorry, I need a drink. My throat's drying up. It's very dry here today. Hang on, one sec. So yeah, another thing is I don't edit my videos, so this is all just one long take. Normally, if I was editing, I would take me taking a sip of my drink out as well as all the other things that I probably didn't need to say in this video. But I hope you guys enjoyed my input, my take. One more thing as a little bonus that I want to say is, I noticed in Abra's scenes there was an anime character with what looked like a light teal hair bob. There was one scene where Abra woke up and there was an action figure running next to her. There was one scene in which there was a poster in her room behind her. And there was another scene where Rebecca Ferguson, Rose the Hat, was in her mind, going through the file cabinets of her mind, and Abra was donning a teal bob. I did some research into this, and apparently this is an anime character that actually exists in the real world. It's a real anime series called Ruby. I think it's spelled R-W-B-Y, but it's pronounced Ruby, and there's a character within that series called Emerald who has the ability to make others hallucinate, and they can't tell what's real and what's not, which I thought was really cool because that's actually one of Abra's powers that she has through The Shining that apparently had never been seen before in people who are familiar with The Shining. What's her name? Rose the Hat from The True Knot was aware that she'd never seen anyone else with this level of ability before. I thought that was kind of cool. And apparently, I also did some research into the actress, Kylie, really likes the anime show Ruby, and so it's cool that she actually got to kind of evoke that character. And a part of me was wondering also if maybe Emerald was kind of like Abra's version of Tony that Danny had, which seemed pretty cool. So yeah, I could talk more about that. Another interesting thing about the series Ruby is that there's a character that looks just like the main character from A Clockwork Orange. The white jumpsuit, even the cane. I think he might even have an eye patch and a top hat. Does he have an eye patch? No, I don't think he has an eye patch, but I think he has a top hat. It's very cool. Very interesting. So there's definitely some Kubrick anime crossover with Ruby there. It's kind of cool. So let me know what you guys think. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. I always notice things like that. And there are a lot of other things that I would love to talk about with this movie. But again, 44 minutes now. I don't want to keep you guys hanging out anymore. I hope you really like this video. I hope that even if you listen to the spoilers, you'll still give this movie a watch, because I do believe it's worth it. And just try to, you know, Jedi mind wipe your mind and pretend you didn't hear anything that I said, and go see it. It works. It really works. Just Jedi mind wipe. You don't remember what I talked about in this video. Now go see Dr. Sleep. You want to see Dr. Sleep. Go see it. All right, guys. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm Kelly. My channel is Jedi Bunny, and may the Force be with you. Bye.